What's up, guys? You're watching Life at TCG. As promised, I did go to GP Nagoya 2 weekends ago, I think, and I decided not to play Pioneer because I felt like I wasn't ready and my deck wasn't very good, and I just played a bunch of GP side events instead. You could argue that this deck was within the range of not very good either, but at least I'm way more familiar with Legacy, and like there weren't really any unfamiliar situations that like confused me and made me regret my decisions in game or whatever, that kind of thing. So I played the Blue-White Saga deck that I talked about in one of my previous videos. I'm not going to talk about like all the decisions that went into building the deck because it's in that video. I'll put a link to that in the description, as well as the deck list I played in the tournament itself. Tournaments plural, which might have been like 1 or 2 cards different, as well as all the matchups that I played in the event. I'll put those in the description as well. I think my final record in all of the different like side events over the weekend was 8, 6, and 3. The draws were all unintentional, and if rounds were untimed, I probably would have won 2 of those and lost 1. I think I could have even won one of those in extra turns, but I made a mistake that meant that I would only have been able to win the game like a couple of turns later, and obviously in turns there wasn't time for that. So while it was like a positive record, like 8, 6, and 3, or arguably like 10, 7, it's probably not as good as I would like for this to be considered like a real deck, because the fields for this are like kind of soft, and the matchup versus some of the better decks in Legacy are like some of the more challenging ones. So the things about the deck that I liked and did not like, Estrus Invocation is an extremely powerful card, and it's very easy to set up the engine with like History of Benalia and Omen of the Sea. Specifically the combo with Estrus Invocation and Omen of the Sea is extremely strong, but it's also good enough with History of Benalia. History of Benalia itself is like quite okay. I think it's like almost on Legacy power level what it does. It works as a finisher with the Estrus Invocation and everything. The plow and like the counterbalance and all of that is good enough. Counterbalance with Omen of the Sea and Brainstorm and everything works well in the deck. And the other thing that I did like was the sideboard package. Enlightened Shooter is pretty good right now, being able to get like Humility, the Disenchant, plus the Back to Basics and the Deafening Silence. Like you have a lot of different options that help in lots of different situations, and I would consider even like regular Miracles decks think about playing that package rather than what some lists are doing now, where they're playing like 2 or 3 copies of Deafening Silence plus 2 or 3 copies of like a Rest in Peace effect or like Grafdigger's Cage, and then like 1 Blood Moon with no way to search for it. I think it might be worth looking into the Enlightened Shooter package for those decks as well, even though they're not fully enchantment based with like the replenish and stuff. And that brings me to the things I did not like about the deck. The replenish is too expensive, especially with the Mirari Conjecture. Like this combo is cute, but you can beat like Fear decks without going over the top in such an extreme way, and against stuff like Delver it just costs way too much mana. So I would probably cut these. The Porphyry nodes, which in my box somewhere, they're not in the photo, were okay, but there were a lot of games that I lost where like I was 1 or 2 turns away from being able to eat their last creature with it. And the deck didn't play any life gain except for the Dawn of Hope, because I cut the Dogen's Acuity, so like I didn't really have a good way of like stabilizing quickly and regaining life to avoid getting burned out, or to give me time for the Porphyry nodes to destroy their board. So that was the thing I didn't like too much. and maybe Minimized Prophecy is like a little bit underwhelming as a card. It's just a little bit slow in terms of what it does. I don't think it's too bad, but it's not that impressive either. So like the changes I would make, I would cut this whole thing, the 2 Replenish and the Mirari Conjecture. I think the value play of like Replenish is fine, but you rarely ever return like so many enchantments with it. And of course you don't have any enchantments in the deck that cost a bunch of mana. They're all like 3 or less except for the Humility. So I think you should just cut the Replenish for Sevinne's Reclamation instead. If you want to like return a Porphyry Nodes quickly to stay alive, or return a Estrus Invocation to start grinding or whatever, it does that job perfectly well for less mana. And because it has flashback, it's a lot more difficult to interact with in terms of countering it, because to prevent your opponent getting, or to prevent you getting all the value out of a Sevinne's Reclamation, your opponent has to counter it twice. So yeah, and then the Mirari Conjecture, you could just cut this for like a 3 mana Teferi or anything like that would be fine as well. Then the Minimized Prophecy, what I would like to do is replace these with Dovin's Acuity. I think that having extra things to combo with the Estrus Invocation is good, and having a more rapid source of life gain, or a more reliable source of life gain in the deck would help a lot, to combine with your Porphyry Nodes as removal, because while I think the Porphyry Nodes is like okay, it does end up using your life total as a resource quite a bit more than something like Terminus would. So having those extra sources of life gain might be quite valuable, and I think drawing a card is more useful than the 2 tokens that you would get from Omen of the Sun. So that's how I would replay this deck again if I was going to play it in another tournament. I think it is very close to being like a real archetype. One thing I'm like semi-interested in is building like a slightly bigger version of this deck that does use Replenish, and it maybe also uses like the Opalescence Parallax Wave combo, and like leans into that synergy a bit more with something like Thirst for Meaning, so you have a way to like discard your enchantments, and then you are playing for this like big end game where like your Replenish gets the Opal Wave combo and you basically instantly win. Whereas with the list like this, the Replenish only like got a little bit of value, and that just wasn't worth it for a 4 mana sorcery. The other way to create more value with the Replenish would be to play more enchantments that cycle. Specifically, Cast Out is like the only really strongly playable one, but that card is pretty decent with Replenish as well. It's just very hard to make a list for that like, in order to make Replenish really powerful, you have to have a certain threshold of like big bombs that you can return with it. But then the more of these you're putting in your deck, the more clunky it becomes, and then you're like really taxing all your brainstorms and your whatever kind of like Thirst for Meaning, whether you have like a looting effect or like some kind of self-mill engine to put all those big bombs in your graveyard so that you can like replenish them back. And then it sort of becomes this weird like combo control deck that has like, could have some really clunky hands potentially. Like you want to have a way to also be able to hard cast your Opalescence and your Parallax Wave. And there have been like green-white builds of that deck which play Seeress Sanctum and the mana enchantments like Wild Growth and Utopia Sprawl and stuff, so that you can actually cast your 4-drops. Whereas to do that in blue-white, you can't really do, because there's no good 1 mana enablers in blue-white for Seeress Sanctum, and you obviously don't have green, so you can't play Wild Growth. So yeah, there's a lot of like tricky stuff around that. Like the green white build of the Opal Wave deck is quite okay, I think, but that list also has some problems. Like the combo matchup's not very good. Maybe that's salvageable now because you have Deafening Silence, which helps a lot versus like Storm style decks, which were a really bad matchup before, because they didn't care about you having Opal Wave, and they were just way faster. So the other interesting thing is that the Opal Wave combo, because it because it lets you interact with your opponent's enchantments as well, you can like exile your opponent's Underworld Breaches with it, which is a kind of funny interaction in the metagame at the moment. But yeah. What I do for this specific blue-white deck is just cut this top end for the Sabine's Reclamation and like a Teferi or something, and then maybe look at replacing these with Dovin's Acuity, which is like a little bit scary because of the cutting 2 drops and adding 3 drops kind of screws up the mana curve a little bit, but the lack of life gain was something that I really struggled with in a lot of the matchups in Japan. But I think a lot of people had fun like playing against this. Obviously in Japan, most of my cards are in English, so there were a lot of judge calls where people had to fill themselves in on the new text they'd never seen before on the cards, like Estrid's Invocation and stuff. But yeah, I had a good time hanging out with all my friends. I met some new people that I'd not seen before in the MTG community, like Simon Nielsen and Christian Calcano and Alexander Hain and stuff. They were pretty cool to hang out with. I had a good time. So yeah, that's the wrap on this blue-white Saga deck. I'm not sure when I might play it in a tournament again. Next, I might try and do a bit of testing with the new suggestions and see how that goes, because I do think the list is like right on the borderline of being a real contender. So that's all for this deck today. This is Li-Fi TCG signing up.